So yeah, again, not an easy one, but I'd uploaded a video, yeah, and as I played the video, and obviously put in any links to what I was discussing in that video under the pinned comment, and always look at the pinned comment for any links that I'm dropping to you. It went on to this from The Guardian. Now, I'm not subscribed to The Guardian, but somehow YouTube thought this was a good idea. So, what lies beneath the Labour landslide? Election predictions. So, I look at this, and I look at this breakdown, which never used to be a thing. People don't realise the destruction of the UK over the last, well, essentially 40 years ago. I mean, honestly, I just, up until a point in the 80s, people were doing pretty well. Now, when all of a sudden somebody said, do you know what, instead of mining our quite literally trillions of tons of high quality coal, we'll import it somehow from abroad on boats. That, honestly, that was the time of the miners' strike, and we had in Scotland the Mick McGaheys of this world and various others. But, I would argue there's a high probability that most of them were Masons, yeah? And at the time, the miners were poverty-stricken in this strike, and having to go to made-up soup kitchens, while Arthur Scargill quite literally was running around in a jag, seriously, and through the witchcraft of propaganda, he was still seen as a man of the people by most miners, yeah? And I cannot tell you this enough. It was the last days of when, for example, towns like Dalkeith and various others were doing really well. The sheer amount of pubs you just wouldn't believe, and various businesses and all the rest of it, because miners historically spent their money. And I cannot say this enough. Be assured of this. They spent their money. And by and large were decent people. Seriously, decent people. And had a spark about them, because let's face it, to go deep underground and travel from that shaft to, sometimes miles to a pit face takes a certain character. That's for sure. And I remember Orwell's The Road to Wigan Pier, which I well recommend. And this was not a fictional book. He was quite literally discussing, by and large, what was happening in the UK in the 30s. And one was definitely impressed at his respect for miners. And in fact, when he went into the detail of just going down a mine, and he points out that most people assume that, they just get off the lift shaft and, they're straight away at this, pit face. No. Sometimes these people had to walk for quite a distance, back, doubled up, all the rest of it, very cramped conditions. And many of them had scars on their backs because of the low ceilings and whatever else, and just crawling almost in your hands and etc. to get to the mine pit face. Yeah. Now, obviously, over time, things improved. But it still took certain types of character to do this. And they would spend their money. And many, many communities would benefit vastly from this. And the more that we've gone to essentially what they term as globalism, but I would argue the one world government scenario, and compartmentalizing of what, gets made where and who by, because all countries are controlled. And you bring about to a situation now where people, so many places around the UK, people are dependent on food banks and feeling like failures because there is not the opportunities that only a few decades ago there were. And even in the 80s, they had their problems, but up until that point, it was pretty positive and for good reasons, yeah? But the push towards collectivism, the push towards agency working, the lack of security and long-term job prospects, the promotion of over time AI, jobs abroad. Even 20 plus years ago, you had a much better service by and large, maybe not the same speed, but technical support, because you were speaking to UK highly skilled people. And then over time, no, we'll get your bills cheaper, but you need to phone to, whoever in India through blah, blah, blah. But people were witchcraft into keeping costs low, never realizing that it's exporting jobs abroad. And that's the same thing with Tesco's and the Asda's and the whatever else, because, what is it? 90% anyway, minimal, that most goods that people buy in these places when it comes to clothing, textiles, whatever else, even technology, it's by and large usually from, China. And let's face it, it's a communist nation, and, so it's essentially money disappearing out of Western nation, and the destruction of a high quality skill base right across the class system to dependency based around, we're all in this together, and it's destruction on steroids. That's what it is. And we've had our distractions, because remember, in the 80s, up until 1982, there was only 3 channels, TV channels, and in I think it was 82, Channel 4 came into existence, and you could go into that in some detail. But even then, it wasn't until something like at least, the late 80s before at least another channel. But into the 90s, cable TV came along, and suddenly you've got hundreds of channels of distraction. Add to that gaming, add to that so many other things. And it literally changed the fabric and structure of society, and families, extended families, confidence where one's staying, the reason why you're staying in that area, the long-term historical bonds, so many things. Meanwhile, architecture-wise, it's these soulless concrete structures that replace what? Other things that connect and tie people to areas for good reasons. Yeah, it is absolutely about collectivism on steroids. Sometimes you hear the term communitarianism, all the rest of it, blah blah blah. But this embracement that food banks are a good thing. No, it's a plaster over a vast problem, because it's like, why are so many people needing food banks now? It never used to be a thing. Never used to be a thing. And all the way through this thing by the Guardian, you can't help noticing a severe lack, let's be honest, of white people. Yeah? We are being literally carved out from the inside. Our way of lives, our historical value, and why we have been so successful as Western nations. Traditions, characters, families, extended families, the confidence in where you stay, that, no matter what generation, people are getting on with each other, and people care about each other. Now it's hostility, and we've all got to do X, Y, and Z and do more, and then it's climate this and disaster that, this climate emergency. Are you a climate denier? Meanwhile, open borders, yeah? And if you're not up for open borders and hugely overcrowded islands, well, you need to have this kind of thing. So, 21 seconds. An individual called Toby says she's basically saying white people are savages and must train them not to be. Think about this. People are being, remember, nobody, and I repeat, nobody is being asked on a referendum as regards immigration. You're not going to get asked that. All you're going to get told is international obligations, and we're wealthy Western nations. We're not wealthy Western nations when we've got quite literally thousands of food banks across the UK. Supermarkets where it says food banks at the front, and what you want to hand to this, and blah, blah, blah. And, ease your conscience and go with the flow. The insanity of that. But let's get back to this. So, Let me grab a speaker. RTE Ireland. This individual.
There are no laws to protect people. People are brought into offices, institutions that are not diverse. So we've not done that work. We've not trained people. And we can't expect our nation to be non-racist if we have not enabled people, we've not trained them, how to be non-racist. So those are key things, and there are no laws to protect people.
Many of these people are coming across with their hands open. I'm not saying this individual. I would argue there's a good chance she'll be in the New Age movement. I'm not saying she is, but she'll be an underling occultist somewhere. It'll be, because remember, the thing about the occult is it's all creeds, colours, and classes. It's a society within our society. It is an occult religion. Yeah? It's our living standards are depleting, are going down by the day. So you end up to be, at some stage, dependent on the state, and the state is demanding more of you by the day. So the universal credits, the whatever else, which ties into the Chinese-style social credit score, and I'm telling you, at some stage, because there's such a focus on this, not only destroying traditional family values, history of Western nations, you've got to destroy families entirely. So at some stage you'll say, well, obviously you can't get a job locally, but we're all global citizens. You need to fuck off to India. Well, what about my family? Well, there's we all have to play our part. The level of this is beyond belief. I'm not joking you. And anybody who's against this, who's like, have we thought this through? What's going on here? Well, obviously they're racist, they're this, they're that, and it's colonialism, that, and this, and whatever, and, white people are being demonized. Well, we've got other puppet white people giving it the following.
And say 20,000 is not enough, 30,000 is not enough. Saturation point, because what does it matter if
saturation point of diversity? Remember, it is absolutely about the annihilation and the replacement of native people in Western nations. This is absolutely part and parcel of this New World Order, to the absolute utter destruction of native Western cultures and all that was rich and good about it for all the right reasons, right across the class systems. Because when you look historically, you go back to the 20s and 30s or before, it was never pleasant for the working class. But also what you look at is the middle class was under attack even then and before. A lot of them were in denial about where things were going. This has taken a long time. Yeah, a long time to get to this point, because Western nations, even at working class level, had people with enough intellect, savvy about them, whatever else, that they could turn their hand to so many different things and skills. Yeah? But when you look after our post-Second World War into the 50s, into the 60s, I would argue that the sweet spot in some regards was somewhere between the 50s and the early 80s. They can pick a decade and things were, oh, well, you had that blip here and there and whatever else. But I can assure you, if you didn't have to have even that high an IQ, but a decent enough education that was well-rounded enough that you had a skill set that you could turn your hand to many things and have some confidence of long-term employment. That's all gone out the window with globalization. And then in comes the Asdas and the Tesco's and all the rest of it, and you're told, hey, look, if it saves you money. Never realising we had many textile industries in the UK, and I've said it recently. You look at the Scottish Borders, Tweed, all the rest of it. The sheer amount of productivity for local communities gave them comfort and confidence that they would have a quality life. Now it's the begging bowl, and we're still being told we're rich Western nations, and yet we're second-class citizens in our own countries, and we're last in the queue. And you've got people like this individual and others saying,
and say 20,000 is not enough, 30,000 is not enough. saturation point, because what does it matter if we have to wait another week for a hospital visit?
But it's not another week. It's sometimes another year. Yeah?
Or if our class sizes are slightly bigger?
Because let's look at the global stats on class, success rates. Countries, tables. Scotland, for example, used to be the envy of the world in many respects. Up until, I would argue, at least into the 90s anyway. Yeah. For example, people who were doing an architecture course, an architecture degree, which is quite tough, seriously. But those even who were English, many of them preferred to study in Scotland because it meant 1 year less, and yet the end result, qualification-wise, held more water. Yeah? We are way past that now. Seriously, way past that.
Or if our city is slightly fuller, what does it matter if things are slightly more challenging, if we have born?
Well, how about, for example, rents, rental costs, property prices, name it, you know? Rental costs have gone through the absolute roof because they absolutely could have solved the housing problem long time ago, decades ago, at a fraction of the cost of what's being spent now on people who were being told we have an international obligation to house at our expense. And if anybody's not up for it, you've got people like this fine individual who says, look,
people are brought into offices, institutions that are not diverse. So we've not done that work. We've not trained people. And we can't expect our nation to be non-racist if we have not enabled people, we've not trained them, how to be non-racist. So those are key things. And there are no laws to protect people. There are no consequences.
We are being told, and our children are being told in schools, right from primary, you're all racists, you're all bigots, you're all homophobes, you're transphobes, you're everything wrong. And we're here to change that. If you're a white individual, honestly, the suicide rate apparently in adolescent and beyond, white males especially, is ridiculously high because they're told right from childhood, you're scum, seriously. And anybody with a different colour is superior to you and deserves more respect and first in the line in queues. And none of this used to be a thing less than a few decades ago. Seriously. The witchcraft of this forced destruction of everything we've held dear, based around an occult belief system that wants to homogenize us globally and then reduce us down to almost nothing as the power elite have their global playground. And it's there in plain sight. And I'll speak to you soon.